How many of you have heard of the 45-year-old tech entrepreneur, Bryan Johnson, who has committed himself to reaching the biological age of an 18-year-old and ultimately to creating the blueprint by which his company is named for humans to live forever? Are you familiar with Bryan Johnson? His motto is, "Don't die." Okay, so Bryan Johnson, but Bryan with a Y, not to be confused with our dear Bryan Johnson with an I, who was featured on our Pure Power podcast in October 2023. Bryan Johnson with the Y has a mission to enable the human race not to die. He has a research team and 30 plus doctors who have together built this blueprint for Bryan, which is essentially a distillation of the most outstanding longevity research available. Bryan invests $2 million a year on his personal routine. This is for his food, his testing, his pills, his gadgets, and so on, so that he can execute his biohacking protocol. Bryan takes 111 pills each day, 66 of which are taken with his morning green smoothie. Among them are ashwagandha, creatine, turmeric, garlic, collagen peptides, off-label prescription meds like type 2 diabetes drugs, acarbose and metformin, and rapamycin and taurine, which have been shown to increase the lifespan of mice. Rapamycin, by the way, is also an immunosuppressant used for organ transplant patients. He also takes 81 milligrams of aspirin 3 times a week, as well as melatonin nightly to sleep, his perfect 8 hours per night, which he gauges on his Whoop sleep monitoring device. Bryan was diagnosed with hypothyroidism at age 21, and he also takes for that levothyroxine and Armour thyroid meds, plus gene therapy injections, and wears a testosterone patch. And that is just the ultra abbreviated list. One of the biggest motivators behind this list of 111 pills is the reduction of inflammation and protecting bone density. Bryan also started taking human growth hormone to regenerate the thymus, which shrinks with age, but stops after 110 days. He stopped after 110 days because it was causing intracranial pressure, as well as headaches and increased blood glucose levels. Bryan's diet, you guys want to hear about Bryan's diet? Okay, just making sure you're still there with me. Okay, Bryan's diet of 2,200 calories per day is limited to a green smoothie, steamed broccoli and cauliflower with lentils, berries with nuts and seeds, all of which are consumed between 6 a.m. and 11 a.m. Sorry if it's making me laugh. It is quite a regimen, right? Okay, he stops eating completely at 11 a.m. That's it. Okay, Bryan is also, it's to say this out loud is quite something. Okay, Bryan is also a proponent of blood plasma transference, by which he's both received his 19-year-old son's plasma and given his own plasma to his 75-year-old father. Now, as you can imagine, he's received a lot of flack from all of this and has been criticized extensively for taking his son's blood, and has been called a narcissist and all the unfortunate things the public expresses when someone challenges norms and introduces new ideas. It's easy to see how people might judge and make assumptions, but hold your fire. So a Vanity Fair February 2024 article entitled "The Long Game" referred to a September 2023 Time magazine profile entitled "The Man Who Thinks He Can Live Forever," describing how Johnson is, quote, turning his whole body over to an anti-aging algorithm, end quote. In the 2-year time frame during which he's been following this protocol, Bryan has apparently achieved 5.1 years of epigenetic age reversal. And apparently that's a world record. And he slowed his pace of aging by 31% and boasts the fitness level of an 18-year-old. Okay, so he says, "We've invested 3 years and millions. Now it's yours." A team of 30 plus doctors researched thousands of scientific papers, Start Blueprint. This is the ad for Blueprint, which is the Blueprint is the name of the company. It's the Bryan Johnson Blueprint that they've come up with, his protocol, and all of his products to go with it. There's all sorts of things, including olive oil and various things. Okay. Now, I just want to state for the record that I do not concur that Bryan Johnson's protocol is the ideal, not remotely. However, I do acknowledge and respect his vision and his spirit that challenges cultural norms and is intent upon breaking program structures. He has many noble ideas and understands the tyrannical misguidance of a culturally controlled mind. He states himself that he is, quote, revolting against the culture of death, end quote. But I also want to dismantle this protocol that has been developed by all these medical research teams to show you something that you need to know about all of this. And it hits right on the head of the purpose of our session today, which is back to basics. The most basic thing you need to know is that we are so incredibly fortunate to have the knowledge we do and not to have to rely on reductionist theories that would only lead us to overlooking the most important factor by which this Blueprint protocol is misguided. And I hope I have the pleasure of getting to share this with Bryan directly someday and undergoing his testing personally. That is among my most pressing interest at the moment, to have our work tested. But here's the most important factor. Bryan's motto is, don't die. He's missed the most obvious and essential lead up to dying. If you want not to die, you first must not decay. I'll let that settle for a second. If you want not to die, you must first not decay. So to dismantle the Blueprint protocol is not a cheeky or unkind thing. Please don't misunderstand me. I hope I made it clear that I mean no disrespect by doing this. It is merely a clinical evaluation I mean to make. I believe those with vision for humanity, healing, consciousness, and transcendence must work together. I would welcome a collaboration with him in this way. But here's what is missing, and here are the problems. Would you like to know? Do you want to know? Okay, I'll tell you. The fact that Bryan is not removing the decay is paramount. In all the interviews and research I've done around Bryan and Blueprint, I have heard absolutely zero mention of bowel movements. Okay, we know what he eats, but we don't know if and when it leaves. I mean, to have a health protocol and make no mention of the exit strategy is something we need to, that needs to land. Just remember, it's research studies distilling the most significant longevity discoveries in history. 30+ doctors. This is the team, the most illustrious team. So this is what they've come up with. And yet I want you to tune in to what they've been missing, what you know, what you live by, and why it's so superior to this. Again, respectfully. Okay. He is not focused on decalcification either. Okay. They're focused on markers like inflammation and bone loss. If you focus on these, if you focus on the inflammation and the bone loss, for example, you might artificially mask the inflammation. For example, he's taking the aspirin to suppress or to address the inflammation, but he's addressing it by suppressing it. Do you get that? So taking aspirin to mitigate inflammation isn't actually what's happening. It's pushing the inflammation deeper into the tissues of the body for a much bigger problem later. It's like taking Sudafed when you're sick. You're gonna wind up with pneumonia at some point, and then you try and suppress that. Okay, so bone density, it's a big concern with Bryan's protocol. Okay, they're addressing bone density. They're concerned about, they're motivated to prevent bone density loss. But we address it easily by preventing the acidity in the body, which is the main reason bone density is depleted. You see? You see how magical? We have all this covered. They're taking 111 pills every day and monitoring everything and stopping eating at 11 o'clock in the morning. Okay, don't get me. All right. So he was taking the human growth hormone to counteract the shrinking of the thymus gland. We fully addressed how that precious immune system star, the thymus, can be regenerated in one of our earliest sessions on the platform in September 2023. Remember, we had that fun session where we went into the thymus. Okay, as for his diet, the consumption of nuts and seeds, we know, we've been studying this in the last few sessions, will deeply dehydrate the body. Remember I pointed out to you, having seen what's happened with raw foodists who include them regularly in their diet? They calcify, they dry out the body. I'm not saying you can't have nuts and seeds every now and then, or that if you blend them with a lot of water and make a salad dressing, that's different. There are ways you can incorporate it, but this is a daily event. This is the mainstay of his diet. The nuts and seeds, he doesn't realize, are going to cause big problems long-term. His pills. We're still in the diet because he's ingesting them. So his pills are part of his diet, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, there's 111 pills. That's a lot of matter going into the body. It's a lot of dry matter. We can't forget that when you're popping supplements, your body has to use its own water stores to break those supplements down. They're dry. Some of them are very thick and dry, very, very dense, very concentrated. So his pills are not only deeply dehydrating, but they're confusing the body's natural messengers. Here's a big one. Bryan wears a testosterone patch to keep his testosterone levels up. Hormone replacement therapy ruins the endocrine secretions, and they will not work properly on their own in time. This is why we don't use hormone replacement therapy. I mean, again, you must always consult with your doctor, and these are things that are medically, supervised. But this is why I don't like them, because they completely confuse the body's own ability to secrete its natural endocrine hormones. As for his diet, let's continue on the diet. There are some very good things. I'm gonna give him a few points, okay? The systematic undereating and the fasting elements, they allow the body to rest from unnecessary digestion and focus on more important things like internal healing. He is preventing countless issues by omitting sugar, starches, grains, which are a starch, of course, too, but I'm going to separate them out, starches and grains, fleshes, and dairy. He has no sugar, no starches, no grains, no flesh, no dairy. Okay, he's going to be better off. The omission of those substances will help anyone restore their youthful vigor. And that alone could account for the regeneration that he's been enjoying. Now, on the downside, there is the obvious absence of adequate chlorophyll. Chlorophyll and organic water, and we know that chlorophyll and organic water are gleaned from green leaves and cucumbers. So, we know that a green smoothie is not the same as a green juice. So whatever's making that smoothie green is still a minuscule amount of greens by comparison to what you need to get the chlorophyll and the vitality of the living waters that come through those leafy greens. So there's that. Otherwise, I have no issue with his diet. But the absence of the green juice and the constant introduction of the nuts is a pretty big problem over the long run. Is this diet something that would change the face of humanity? Think about it for a second before I answer it. Is this diet something that would change the face of humanity? I say absolutely, yes. But is it the ultimate for longevity? Not a chance. Most importantly, without tissue cleansing, removing the decay, so without actually having the tissue cleansing, removing the decay, all these impressively restrictive diets, whether it's what he's doing or someone else is doing that's similar or along the lines of raw vegan fasting in that vein, they're ineffectual because the body remains septic. I'm not surprised he's feeling much better. He was a self-professed overeater before. Okay, he's gonna feel a lot better if he went from overeating on a lot of other things and starches and all sorts of other things he may have been consuming to doing what he's doing now. He's 45. He's a man. He should be in really great shape, number one, at that age, and number two, with that diet. It doesn't mean it's going to work long term. Doesn't mean he's not going to calcify, dry out, and that decay is not going to be a massive problem over long term. But at 45, he's going to get away with it. Okay, here's another biggie. He shuns the sun. This is starting to sound like I mean it to be like not. I didn't mean to kind of take it apart the way it sounds. I'm just enthusiastic about how we can look at it and make sense of it, not in any way to, like I said, I really admire so much about his noble vision to undertake all of this. I just want to bring this to him and say, here's what's missing. You want to really do this. And this is what it's about. It's like if someone's putting this much into it, I want to help get behind it with them. But I want to show you guys what it is that's missing so you can always decrypt and analyze and make sense of anything you hear out in the world and not be deceived and not be hypnotized by something that just sounds really good because so many doctors and so much research went into it and, yada, yada. So shunning the sun. You will notice that he has distinct pallor and he regrets his time in the sun growing up without sunscreen. So that tells me that, the sun is something that is not clearly understood in terms of longevity for him. The sun is the source of life. We cannot forget the sun is the source of life. I'm not saying go and bake yourselves and fry yourselves in the 2 o'clock in the afternoon sun. No, please don't do that. But we have to embrace the sun, respect the sun, and appreciate that nothing would be here without the sun. So it has to be a big life generator. It has to be a big factor in longevity. Okay, so the sun being the source of life, it's a pretty major oversight if the idea to live forever, or is to live forever, or as long as can be eked out with all the money and research in the world. The sun and the decay factors, those two, leave me sorely wanting. In all of his supplements, I'm not seeing any pathogen eviscerators. Without understanding decay and pathogens, it's like the whole biological mechanic structure is being overlooked. So everything that goes on in our biological terrain, the mechanics of biology, it's all about, thermodynamics, entropy. If things are decaying, they're going to breed pathogens because that's the decay cycle. And that's how the tissue gets broken down and is then necrotic, dead. So it's a complete overlooking of that. 111 pills. Where are the pathogen eviscerators? Who's at the helm of the ship? Okay, the point is, you guys are so far ahead of this. $2 million investment every year. 30 plus doctors, research teams. I keep repeating myself, I know, but I really want to drill it in. All of that. You guys live a life and have an understanding and knowledge that you apply that transcends all of that. And I'm not shy to say it is so far superior. We're quiet. We're a little bit, we're a little bit in the background here. Not because there's any reason to be, but just because, there's not necessarily a huge appetite for this. But the funny thing is that I know that you guys have often felt that what you're doing is so unusual. I hope you don't feel that way anymore. So with all of this, you guys are way ahead. And you don't have to take 111 pills and stop eating at 11 a.m. It's a lot of ones, by the way. Or be in bed at 8:30, which is part of his protocol as well. Sleep is crucial. I'm not knocking his emphasis on that at all, but life doesn't have to be so exacting in that way. Health doesn't have to be so exacting. And again, it's funny because it makes what we do look so free and easy. And, so to keep the perspective when you feel the pressure around the way you choose to live, and you feel that, it's that the cleansing lifestyle is extreme. In light of this, it's really not. So, okay. So I wasn't cheeky before, but now I'm going to get a little cheeky. I'm going to say again, like at 45-year-old man should look pretty young, should be in good shape if he's exercising, at which he is. And the guys on this platform, how much I love you. I'm just going to say he's a guy, right? The real proof in longevity, the real proof in a longevity protocol is when you put it to the test of pregnancies, childbirths, and the nursing and raising of multiple children. One is enough, but multiple even more so. And sometimes, I just want to point this out to you guys for like academic purposes, sometimes men in the health field miss this. Women's hormones, the way we digest fats, the way we can't do the nuts and seeds and the oils, the way they seem to get away with, the work our body goes through when we're reproducing. I mean, it's really, to me, we need again, it's just something, if I hope that we get the opportunity to do the research I'm so keen to do, and it's really high time. It needs to be done. And this is inspiring me to do it. Okay. But here's another big takeaway that you're going to love. The absence of cleansing is a major biggie, but in addition to failing to cleanse and expecting not to rot and ingesting a whole catalog of supplements and meds is the infusion of his son's blood plasma. And granted, he gave his own father his blood plasma too. So he's not just like siphoning off his son's. It's just a considered, he's doing it for the right reasons. He's not trying to, be a vampire here. So I just want to clarify that I appreciate why he's doing it. But you need to know this. You do not need to take in the blood of a younger person to make your blood younger, to make yourself younger. You just need to clean your own blood, which is what we're doing when we cleanse the way we do. So if he were doing the work that we're doing, he would naturally be cleaning his blood, but he's not cleaning his own blood. If he cleaned his own blood by cleaning the waste out of his body that is making his blood filthy and thereby old, he would not have to introduce young blood. Isn't that cool? Yeah. So we should never touch the veins if we can avoid it. It was never meant to be done. All those blood draws and things, I don't do them. I don't do them for a lot of reasons, but I don't believe we should interfere with our veins. I don't believe the blood wants to be opened up and messed with. There's a reason. Everything is airtight. There is a reason for it. Now, I have had intravenous ozone and hydrogen peroxide because I felt at those times that my blood needed the oxygen that came from them, because the pathogens, because living in New York City, because having multiple children, all of these things. But the drawing of our blood and the withdrawal of so much, this is a real problem. So keep that in mind always. Your blood does not want to be drawn. So this blood drawing is madness. And I know too well what transfusions are like. I needed one and they saved my life. I was connected to transfusions for the better part of 6 weeks when I was 3.5 years old. And that's a big reason I think I also just don't like the idea of it at all, but it really is not meant to be messed with. And there's no indigenous or historical group that, that would dream of doing that. So that's the first prelude. Are we okay to do the next number 2 and then actually get into the meat of the session? Give me some thumbs up. Okay. All right. So if that weren't enough, because I can't hold back with you guys. I'm not going to wait 2 weeks to share some of these things. They have to be that it's happening now. All right. So there's this commonly held belief in our culture that when we reach a certain age, around 30 years old, we start to decline. Our skeletal muscular structure and system is then requiring so much more effort than it did in our younger years to maintain. Our organs become weaker and generally we go into decline. Okay, this is a commonly held belief, and it's commonly held understanding that it happens around 30 years old, specifically the muscular system. So this would be a commonly accepted program belief to someone who knew nothing about the deep tissue cleansing work that we do and the reality of the accumulation of toxic waste and food waste matter. But to me and to you who have been studying cleansing and apprehending tissue cleansing, it's abundantly clear that this timeline by which humans seem to collectively decline is not a factor of time, of mere chronology, the circling of a human revolving around our central sun. So of what then? Of what is it a factor? What is causing our decline if it is not a chronological fait accompli? The decline is simply a factor of the quantity of the toxicity accumulated, which comes from both food waste residue and from the bombardment of electromagnetic energy, the external forces, onto our cells, our tissues, our organs, and our energetic fields. As we revolve around the sun, we clock more and more meals and more environmental toxins, both visible and invisible. But time is only a factor insofar as the quantity of waste is compounded over time. I'm going to say that again. Time is only a factor insofar as the quantity of waste is compounded over time. Time in and of itself, in the absence of the stuffing up of the bodily cells and tissues, and absent of the electromagnetic acidity pummeling the energy body, time has not the bearing on our deterioration that we have believed it to have. Remove the degenerated DNA from decades of misguided lifestyle. Remove the factor of toxic accumulation and toxic exposure, and add the strong spiritual connection man was designed to embody. Just imagine that man before all this, okay, he would naturally have this strong spiritual connection designed to embody that. And then let's see how the human body expresses and how it fares over a lifetime and what a lifetime actually is. Because I'm with Bryan Johnson, Bryan with a Y, in that we don't know, because there's been this mass cultural hypnosis to consume things that have basically caused everyone to trash themselves. So how do we even know? Let's do that research. Let's get there. But we have to realize that time is not the reason. We have to get over the idea that time is the reason. So deeply ingrained in us. And by the way, I'm not saying we should strive to live as long as Methuselah, or that there's, the length of life is even a top ranking goal. That's not what I subscribe to at all. And if that interests you, great. If it doesn't, there's no reason that you need to focus on that. We're not trying to see how long we can live. I don't believe that's a goal. I think that's something we can. It'd be good to know, just like, a lot of things that are helpful for us to know, like what is the potential of something. It's perfectly valid for us to know that. It doesn't mean that that needs to be our goal, or that we've somehow not lived a valuable life, or the life we were born to live, if we only make it a few decades or less. We don't know what our souls come in for, but we do need to know what the potential is. So that's really all I'm getting at here. I really don't think, and also, obviously, I say this because to me it's really obvious, but I think it's important saying for the record, we're not trying to see, the idea of living a really long life, making it to 120, but being super fragile and not having a working bladder and having hip and knee replacements. That's not the vital lifespan I'm imagining when I talk about this. I'm talking about living vitally for whatever our potential is, and then whatever the natural causes are, we don't go through this agonizing decline, which is, really something that is very sad. It's not the kind of life I think we were designed to live, and we probably wouldn't have unless, except the fact that we have all these modern provisions these days. So that, just to clarify. But it's, as I like to say, it's not the number of times we go around the sun that ages us. It's the amount of waste matter we accumulate as we go around the sun that ages us. Okay. So I pointed this out to someone who's very committed to this cleansing work, and he was floored when he heard me say this. And this is why I mentioned this before our back to basics conversation, because I really want, this is like, I was really surprised, because even after years of living the work to a T, using the enlightener almost daily, he said, wow, well, if that's really true, that would change everything in medical science. We have to document this, he says. This is so important. Like this is the most important thing ever. We have to find a way of proving this. And I responded to him like in awe, asking like, wait, hold on. How is it that this is not clear to a dedicated student of this work? How was this missed? And why is it such a surprise and epiphany to him all like these years later along this path? And so after asking him this question, I addressed it to him. How is this not so apparent to you? I'm confused. He just looked at me baffled, as if this clicked for him for the very first time, and repeated that it was so groundbreaking and it had to be revealed. Like, this is what I've been saying for 25 years. This is the whole point. Like, it's a waste accumulation. It's not time. And he's like, whoa. So I want to ask each of you, how many of you feel that this concept is clicking into place for you for the very first time right now as I'm telling you this? And you don't, it's somewhat rhetorical, and you can share if you'd like to, but just generally speaking, do you walk around knowing this? Or is it sort of like, whoa, wow, that's amazing. If the world knew this, everything would change. So yeah, why do some know this as we're gathered here together today and others don't? Why did this client I'm referring to not really appreciate it until recently? Well, I think I know why. It's basically what Mara said. It's because everyone hears what they're receptive to hearing. This knowledge is so profound, and it turns everything in our culture on its head. As such, it takes layers of receiving and integrating the knowledge. There's no point in rushing it, and there's no need to rush it, but there is a need for repetition, because that which cannot be heard, received, and integrated initially will be heard, received, and integrated eventually, if it continues to be presented to the person's consciousness. We all need this in the areas that matter, because truth, while clear and simple, is hidden. So when we find it, it flies in the face of everything we were taught was true, causing at first a great deal of cognitive dissonance. If we can get beyond the cognitive dissonance, the next thing we need is consistent training of this new idea, reinforcing it until it unseats the hypnotized beliefs that have been there for decades and drilled into us from earliest childhood. Exactly what Mara was saying. And if we can do that, that is no small triumph. That is major. So if you've even come that far, that's huge. Beyond that lies the deeper truth around the shift that you've made, such as this concept of aging I've referred to just now. To grasp that, one first has to override their cognitive dissonance around the common cultural assumptions of food, of aging, of medicine, of all of these things. I mean, think about our cultural adages. Work to put bread on the table. A wealthy nation means a chicken in every pot. World dysentery is caused by starvation. Ideal nutrition is 3 square meals based on the FDA food pyramid. Think about all the spotlight we put on food in all of our celebrations. The admonition to eat or you'll get sick goes on and on. Meanwhile, the reality is festering inside of us due to the lie that the food waste supposedly leaves the body. So there we are, taking in all these facts when we're little, and then the reality is that we're actually sick because the food waste that was supposed to leave the body is festering inside of us. And then we don't understand that, so we're trying to look outside of us to authorities for a solution to take something or even change the diet. Changing the diet without removing the decay is not going to work. And these are the pennies that have to drop. This is one part of the back to basics. Of course, there's more. If one is fortunate enough to learn the truth, as you all have, there's a clear motivation to change the diet and cleanse. Then we have the life change stage. Now, many of you have gone through the life change stage. Many of you are just beginning it now. But this is something that only those with a strong sense of self will manage to initiate. So I want you to think about your sense of self with a big S. Your I am, your sense of true self, your sense of sovereignty. If you don't have that sense of sovereignty, it's going to be much harder for you. So build that sense of sovereignty. Find out what's kept you from that, because that is going to be your ticket to being able to really anchor the life change stage. Because this stage is met with substantial obstacles, both within the self, within the surface mind self. It's all programmed, and it's going to stop you along the way because it has addictions and it has all these inclinations and hankerings, and also by the way of influence by others. And, as you know full well, that can be really intimidating. So you've got to discipline yourself according to the cleansing precepts, confront longstanding addictions, reconsider some of your social activities, generally adjust to the plan around this new lifestyle. Those things all need to happen for it to become a life change. And that takes care, it takes effort, it takes a steely determination. That sense of self, that's your steely determination, not in any way, aggressive, but it's kind of this does sound a bit aggressive, like the whole don't tread on that. This is my land. I actually get to live this life. I was given this sovereign life to lead. That's a steely determination that will come from that. And that's what then you can really lay it all down and make that life change. Okay. And then at last, I'm almost done with this part. At last, once there is a steadiness to the new lifestyle and an ease around coming full circle to embody the basic precepts, then the deeper reflections and the deeper ramifications of this knowledge will really land in you. Like what I was saying about, it's not about how many times you go around the sun, but what you accumulate as you go around the sun. Then you can sit in the grass and with the sun shining on you and dream about all these connections that you're making. Like, whoa, yeah, and then that and that and that. And you could do that all afternoon and just have the best time because you're figuring all these things out for yourself and nobody has to tell you. But to get there, you have to reprogram, or not reprogram, because we never want to program. You got to unprogram. Again, as Mara was saying, unprogram all that was put in and have enough that steely determination, that sense of self, to put in these things into place so that you can start practicing in them and living them. And then they become second nature. And then the greater clarity starts to come. So we don't want to rush it. We don't want to, think of those reflections where you're, twiddling your toes in the sun, thinking about all the connections you're making. Think about that as, 12th grade, if you want to. And, and maybe we shouldn't grade it because maybe that's a little bit of a programming thing too, as I say it out loud, but recognize there's a progression, however you want to imagine that progression, however it's helpful and functional and healthy for you. Okay, so we're not meant to deteriorate because we reach a certain age, and all of these things that will start to really make sense. And once you own that, once you know it, it's going to liberate you so hugely. So now each of you has absorbed parts of this work and parts of the knowledge that you've had ears for. Remember I was saying before that you can't take everything in at once. It just doesn't work that way. That's why I say listen to the Zooms over and over again, because you're going to hear things you couldn't hear before, because the consciousness can only take in so much at once. So when things are repeated, you're more likely to hear what you didn't hear before, because trust me, there are things you didn't hear. I know it's hard to believe, but that's really how it works. So that's what we're going to work on correcting today, and of course into the future as needed, because that's what repetition is about. As we do, I'm going to leave you with one more really important takeaway that's to do with these twiddle your toes in the sun kind of reflections. I want you to consider the face. I'm connecting this to the Bryan Johnson exploration, as well as to the going around the sun and time, that concept. The face falling apart is due to two things. This is so important, you guys. This is as big as the blood thing. This is huge. First one is systemic waste migrating to the face, filling up the tissues in the face, just like stuffing your home up and sticking things in free spaces. So, you know, those times when, you know, I'm sure you don't do it anymore, but, oh, here's an empty drawer. Let me just stick that in there because this is all full. Okay. Systemic waste migrating to the face, filling up the tissues in the face. That's one way the face falls apart. And people don't think about this because they don't know what we know. The body is completely porous. Everything is moving. The waste is moving from the colon into the walls of the colon, into the body at large. It's going everywhere. So waste in the face. I know. But remember, we can undo all of this because we know how. We don't just know the problem, we know the solution. So that's why we can speak about it with a laugh and a giggle and a wink and a smile. And it's like, you know, no problem. Let's know it though. Let's know how, like, why we don't have to be at the mercy of any of, you know, these distracting, erroneous falsehoods. Okay, that's a redundancy. Okay. Number two, the decay of that waste, both locally in the face and systemically everywhere, deteriorating the integrity of the bones and the conductivity of the life force organism-wide. It stops. Let me try and explain this to you a bit differently. Or let me just try and say it better. So that decay, that local decay, is breaking down the structure of the face. It's breaking down the bones. Because it's happening systemically, your face, along with the rest of your body, isn't getting the conducting life force because there's a systemic pandemic in your body of obstruction. So that's why the face breaks down. The waste migrates there. Body needs space to put stuff. Stuff that came from where? Stuff that didn't leave from your colon when you were 10 years old. Because it had to, I mean, it's a long journey for that waste to go from the colon through the tissues of the large intestine into the body at large and make its way up to the face. That's a long way. That's decades. So that happens, and that waste is not just going to stuff it and mess around with the shape of it and make it puffy and, you know, just unattractive in a lot of ways. And this is not about, this is not about, you know, there are times when we'll speak specifically on beauty, and there are people that care a lot about that. There are people who don't care a lot about that. And I'm just here to serve you, and we can talk about anything. I'm happy to do that. But it's a fact that you really don't want waste in your face. Just from a health perspective, you don't. Because anything that's going to break down our skull is going to be like the nail in the coffin. Let's be frank. So that's happening. And then the conductivity throughout the body is being prevented because of all the obstruction system-wide. So, you know, and then, you know, this is a compounding problem because of the degree to which the organs deteriorate. So here, now let's take it a little bit further. Remember that if there's obstruction throughout the system and that life force can't pulsate and communication isn't made, the whole conversation we had about the thymus, by the way, back in September, was about the communication that has to happen for the immune system to work properly, the T cells, you know, to make it to the thymus, and all that they have to do. I'm sure you guys remember, some of you remember, it was a really cool journey we went on there. But the communication is everything. We have the infinite intelligence, the cells, the atoms, we have, it's all the secretions of the entry system. Everything is trying to communicate. It's cooperation and communication. The body thrives on that. It completely disintegrates without it. So wherever we have obstruction, we have the prevention of cooperation, the prevention of communication. So if the organs themselves are thickening with waste and becoming and prevented from receiving the life force, they're going to deteriorate. What are you going to do with a deteriorated liver, deteriorated kidneys, deteriorated pancreas, spleen, lungs, heart, skin, reproductive organs? What are you going to do with that? And that's just, and how is that going to make the face look from a beauty perspective? If we want to talk, if we want to go there, you're going to see all of those deteriorated organs reflecting in the visage. It's going to be right there. It's going to be because the face, like the hands and the feet, it's like reflexology. We have the whole map on the face. And because the face isn't going to get the skin and the face, it's not going to get, and the bones, because the bones are deteriorating because of the acidity in the body, the whole thing, it's going to fall apart en masse. But let's understand why. So we can take it apart and we can look at the whys of the individual parts, and then we can pan out and see systematically, organism-wide, what's happening. And it's the same, it's as above, so below. You can take any cell in the body. Remember, the blood, so the quality of your blood feeds every single cell in your body. So if the quality of your blood is not pristine, how can you expect your cells to do what they're supposed to do? Okay, so that's why the issue is compounding. And that's why the compounding of the issue compounds the deterioration of the face. Okay, so to put that another way, in case this helps, the bloating, the falling facial structure is waste having migrated to the facial skin and the skull. And then I want you to think about, how is it possible to fix that topically, to fix it cosmetically from outside rather than addressing it within? I mean, the fillers, all these injections and facelifts and all of these things, you realize just how completely fruitless and futile it is, because there's nothing that you can do here other than very temporary solution, Band-Aid solution. You're not going to be able to fix anything topically. Even the best skincare in the world can't do it. And if you're going to use the Kirsten Kyer-Weiss products, which I love, you got to cleanse your body too. You can't just put something on topically and it because it's such a good product. I mean, it will help. It will help more than any other product, but it's not going to cover up this mayhem forever. Okay, so if you want to save face, literally, the waste must go and be prevented from reaccumulating. That is the answer. All right, so I'm gonna. Oh, and of course, there's the scar tissue aspect, of course, to a lot of invasive facial correction modalities. Like, for example, you get a facelift, but now you've got scar tissue. So your skin is never going to be the same. It's never going to have a chance because the scar tissue prevents the conductivity. You see how this just becomes so problematic. The more you mess with things rather than fixing the original cause, the more you'll have to. The more you'll be at the mercy of external things forever. And that goes back to the Bryan Johnson conversation, because again, Bryan with the Y. I just want to say that because there's such different individuals. But who wants to be beholden to all of those things in order to live a long life? That's not very empowering at the end of the day. So, if you actually have to take 111 supplements and you have to do it, and they're still not working anyway, but nevertheless, so eventually he'll come to that conclusion. But this is why, the world is hypnotized against the knowledge that food compiles at a certain point, rather than enlivening the body. It's so convinced, it's so hypnotized that against the knowledge that food compiles. So it doesn't believe it. It's hypnotized to believe that food goes in and it comes out. So that's why this knowledge is so just so hidden, not because we're hiding it, but because people actually are blocked from even thinking that that's possible. So it's for this reason that we cleanse. And everything we do in this work is to remove the waste accumulation, because we don't want it migrating. And that which has migrated, we want to get to. And we want to save the organism. We save the organism by reversing the waste accumulation, by taking it out of the colon. And then the emptying of the colon creates the vacuum, where we vacuum clean the waste from the colon tissues into the center of the colon. And then that leaves. And then we create the vacuum again. And then we just basically vacuum clean our body with water and empty space. We clean with water, then we clean with a vacuum, and we repeat the process. And the soap, of course, is your alkalinity, your green juice, mostly. If you're going to stay within the same food group, so for example, you had an avocado salad, but you wanted to have some steamed vegetables and a sweet potato later, you don't have to wait, because you're in the same realm. If you want to switch, say you want to have fish and goat cheese for dinner and a salad and steamed vegetables, then you got to make sure you've waited. If you want to have, you can have some crudité and a guacamole dip after having a salad with a sweet potato for lunch. Those things are all in the same. What if you're combining in the same way, the same foods, you don't have to wait. It's only if you're jumping categories. But can I just add one thing, that we don't actually want to be eating all day, and we want to eat and get on with it. And but it depends on your transition. So if you're somebody who has been grazing, for years, then keep grazing for now, but graze on things that are alkaline and that are copacetic in terms of food combinations. So if you want to eat every 2 or 3 hours, because that's just kind of where you are right now, no problem, do that, but just bring up the quality of the food. Snack on your carrots and raw sweet potatoes, and gnaw on some raw corn on the cob, and have a sweet potato, and have some guacamole dip, and you can just, graze the day away and do your colon irrigation, and you're going to totally take off. You're going to be in amazing shape. So I'm not saying you can't graze. I'm just saying that ultimately we want to get to a point where we're not so much in like the oral fetish mode with food. Let's call it what it is. I was there. I was a complete food addict. I totally understand. Like, I know what it's like to think, oh my God, I have to wait this long to eat again, because eating is my only pleasure and life is really depressing otherwise. And food makes me happy. And I have to wait. What am I going to do to distract myself? I've got a whole other hour. What am I going to do? So I totally understand. I remember there was a point when there was I was still in the corporate world, and there was an au bon pain close by. And my trick to get me through over the hump was, after I had my massive salad, it was like this enormous bowl. It was, because the idea was, oh my gosh, I can, eat a raw meal and it's totally fine, because my history with food, it was like, I was so food obsessed. And I could eat this whole thing and it would last me like an hour. I'd work at my desk and I'd be like, every so often I'd stick the fork in, and it was so good. And I was still using like balsamic dressing in those days and all these things. And then I knew, so that was like at 12, so I couldn't even wait. I was so keen to have my salad, so like ready for lunch. And then I was like, how am I going to get, because when you're in a corporate environment, especially if you're not super enthused about your job, it can, those hours between 1 and 6 or so, however long you're going to be there, and some days it would drag on to 7. It's like, what am I going to do? It's so many hours not eating. Because before that I would maybe have the carnation hot chocolate and fat-free milk and all these different things that I have in my old world that were making me sick. And I couldn't even really have them. So I would go to au bon pain, I get a vegetable soup, because I knew it was neutral, and it would get me through the afternoon. And then sometimes I'd wind up having the roll with it. It was like, I did whatever I could to kind of get it over that hump without doing too much damage. And so you do what you need to under the circumstances, and that will change. Everything does change. If you stick with things, eventually you evolve. And then one day you're like, wait a minute, that's not even where I am anymore. And I don't even, and somehow life takes you out of certain circumstances that aren't good. If you're doing the right things to live in a higher frequency, things start to shift around you, even if you're not necessarily thinking they will. They typically do. So for what it's worth. Do you know how many evolutions of upgrading a pizza you can do? You know, it's going from like whatever Domino's or the delivery or to, you know, or a restaurant pizza to suddenly you're taking a spread of grain tortilla and putting the marinara sauce and the goat cheese on it. And you know, you can upgrade these things and you do the cauliflower pizza crust. There's so many ways. If you like that pizza taste, and trust me, I'm with you on it. I went through like just constantly, consistently leveling up what ingredients went into making a pizza. So there's always that space to play. As long as you're consistently, you know, progress, not perfection, you're consistently making these adjustments. The kidneys, yes. So basically, we don't want to take in huge quantities of liquids. We don't want to ever take in more than we need, and we need far less than we think we do. So if you, you know, don't just drink water to drink water. Eat your water and drink your food. That's most important. So, and I know that you guys know what that means already, but for anyone who's new, eat your water means eat water, high water content foods. So you eat your water and you drink your food means that your greatest nourishment comes from your green juices. Your green juices are your highest concentration of nutrition. So that's how you're drinking your food. So if you eat your water and drink your food, you're not going to need to drink so much water. Eventually you get to a point where, you know, you don't drink much water at all, but remember that your green juice is organic water, meaning it's the liquid coming from the plant. So it's the best distilled water you can actually drink. And if you want to have the best quality water at home, you know what you can do? Get organic cucumbers and run them through the juicer. There's your like most pristine, high quality water. Living water, the closer the cucumbers have been to the ground, the better. But people are talking so much, it's the whole thing about water. Everyone's drinking too much water. Their bodies are completely dry. They're not rehydrating, or they're not hydrating what actually needs to be hydrated, which is the colon. And so it just becomes a joke. They're wanting to put pure water into their septic bodies. They're afraid of everything outside of themselves, but what's inside of themselves would shock them if they even had, you know, a clue. If they put their blood under a microscope or they looked into their tissues and saw the terrain and what's happening in there, they would be freaked out. But yet, you know, what they take in, the water has to be so pure. Other things are, you know, they don't seem to mind it so much. Yeah. Okay, so when we talk about going back to the basics of tissue cleansing, there is nothing basic about it. It is all highly advanced by the world's measure of dietetic health practices. But more importantly, if we miss the point, we miss our chance to soar, as each person can who learns how to reverse this problem of waste accumulation. So when we talk about back to basics, the most important thing you have to know is that the waste accumulation is the issue. So people will still ask questions about like, well, you know, all these details about the diet, and that's okay. But don't forget the diet's not going to fix everything. Diet's not going to fix anything if you don't have the waste accumulation problem addressed. All of our procedures here are based upon this specific root knowledge. And the way to the sort of big title I would give it is the mechanics of cleansing.